Since the time of the Greeks, philosophers have reflected on the nature and scope of truth and knowledge. Nietzsche shares this interest, but his analysis of truth and knowledge is quite unusual. He insists that they're very human affairs, inseparable from the conditions of human life.
There is no relation of subject and object, but rather a particular species of animals that can prosper only through a certain relative rightness, above all regularity of its perceptions, so that it can accumulate experience. The meaning of knowledge here, as in the case of good or beautiful, the concept is to be regarded in a strict and narrow anthropocentric and biological sense. In order for a particular species to maintain itself and increase its power, its conception of reality must comprehend enough of the calculable and constant for it to base a scheme of behavior on it. The utility of preservation, not some abstract theoretical need not to be deceived, stands as the motive behind the development of the organs of knowledge. They develop in such a way that their observations suffice for our preservation. In other words, a species grasps a certain amount of reality in order to become master of it, in order to press it into service.
Most philosophers have viewed conscious life as a set of activities completely different from the world of nature. For Nietzsche, this is a mistake. We can properly understand ourselves and our activities only if human life is translated back into nature, at least initially. But Nietzsche believes we must also translate ourselves back into society. This social context has shaped and developed the human intellect in many important ways. In one of his earliest essays on this, Nietzsche begins with what he calls a little fable.
In some remote corner of the universe, there once was a star on which clever animals invented knowledge. That was the haughtiest and most mendacious minute of world history, yet only a minute. After nature had drawn a few breaths, the star grew cold, and the clever animals had to die. One might invent such a fable, and still not have illustrated sufficiently how wretched, how shadowy and flighty, how aimless and arbitrary the human intellect appears in nature. There have been eternities when it did not exist, and when it is done for again, nothing will have changed. For this intellect has no further mission that would lead beyond human life. It is human, rather, and only its owner and producer gives it such importance, as if the world revolved around it. The intellect, as a means for the preservation of the individual, unfolds its chief powers in deception. For this is the means by which the weaker, less robust individuals preserve themselves, since they are denied the chance of waging the struggle for existence with horns, or the fangs of beasts of prey.
Nietzsche goes on to trace the idea of truth to the establishment of conventional rules of language. As language began to develop, metaphors were used to designate things in a uniform manner. First sounds and then eventually signs were given standard meanings and uses. But Nietzsche points out that only the relation of things to man are designated by these linguistic symbols. No independent reality is depicted in them.
What then is truth? A mobile army of metaphors and anthropomorphisms. In short, a sum of human relations which have been enhanced, transposed, and embellished poetically and rhetorically, and which, after long use, seem firm, canonical, and obligatory to a people. Truths are illusions, about which one has forgotten that this is what they are, metaphors, which are worn out and without sensuous power. To be truthful means using the customary metaphors. In moral terms, it means the obligation to lie, according to a fixed convention, to lie, herd-like, in a style obligatory for all.
More recently, we've added scientific terms and theories to ordinary language. They improve our ability to deal with the world in many ways. But Nietzsche argues that they don't actually explain things in any ultimate sense.
Physics, too, is only an interpretation and exegesis of the world, to suit us, if I may say so, and not a world explanation.
Like our ordinary pre-scientific ways of talking about the world, scientific theories are effective for specific human purposes, and that, Nietzsche says, is basically what their truth amounts to. Simplification, abstraction, and the use of fictions contribute to their effectiveness in important ways, by making it easier for us to control and exploit natural events. For Nietzsche, human knowledge provides only an artificial but useful conceptual scheme. Our practical needs compel us to conceptualize things in a simple way.
The entire apparatus of knowledge is an apparatus for abstraction and simplification, directed not at knowledge, but at taking possession of things. End and means are as remote from its essential nature as are concepts. With end and means, one takes possession of the process. One invents a process that can be grasped. With concepts, we similarly determine the things that constitute the process.
Nietzsche's reasoning leads him to make some startling claims about truth, reason, and knowledge. Our truths, he says, are mostly errors we accept because we can't get along without them. Reason merely reflects the rules and structures of our language.
Truth is the kind of error without which a certain species of life could not live. The value for life is ultimately decisive. We believe in reason. This, however, is the philosophy of grey concepts. Language depends on the most naive prejudices. We cease to think when we refuse to do so under the constraint of language. We barely reach the doubt that sees this limitation as a limitation. Rational thought is interpretation according to a scheme that we cannot throw off.
Nietzsche further argues that all knowledge is interpretive rather than factual. Knowledge also can never be absolute. It always reflects perspective and context.
Against positivism, which halts at phenomena, asserting that there are only facts, I would say, no. Facts is precisely what there is not, only interpretations. We cannot establish any fact in itself. Perhaps it is folly to want to do such a thing. Insofar as the word knowledge has any meaning, the world is knowable. But it is interpretable otherwise. It has no meaning behind it, but countless meanings. I call this perspectivism. It is our needs that interpret the world, our drives, and their for and against.
Yet Nietzsche doesn't conclude that we can never comprehend anything at all. Our ability to shift perspectives makes it possible for us to understand much about ourselves and our world. This is his way out of the radical relativism that might seem to be implied by his emphasis on perspective and context.
But precisely because we seek knowledge, let us not be ungrateful to such resolute reversals of accustomed perspectives and valuations. To see differently in this way, for once, to want to see differently, is no small discipline and preparation of the intellect for its future objectivity, to be understood not as contemplation without interest, which is a nonsensical absurdity, but as the ability to control one's pro and con, and to dispose of them so that one knows how to employ a variety of perspectives and affective interpretations in the service of knowledge. There is only a perspective seeing, only a perspective knowing, And the more affects we allow to speak about one thing, the more eyes, different eyes, we can use to observe one thing, the more complete our concept of this thing, our objectivity, will be.
Nietzsche is convinced that many of the things that people often misunderstand can be better comprehended this way. They include the general character of life and the world, our human nature, and value and morality as well.
Thoughts about moral prejudices, if they are not meant to be mere prejudices about prejudices, presuppose a position outside morality, some point beyond good and evil to which one has to rise, climb, or fly. The question is whether one really can get up there. This may depend on manifold conditions. One has to be very light to drive one's will to knowledge into such a distance, to create for oneself eyes to survey millennia, and, moreover, clear skies in these eyes. One must have liberated oneself from many things that oppress, inhibit, hold down, and make heavy precisely us Europeans today. Someone who wants to behold the supreme measures of value of his time must first of all overcome this time in himself. This is the test of his strength.
Nietzsche has this type of insight in mind when he observes that something might be true while being harmful and dangerous to the highest degree. Such truths may be found exhilarating, harsh, and ugly, or merely uninteresting. But Nietzsche praises those daring inquirers who have the strength, courage, and intellectual ability to pursue them.
One must be prepared to sacrifice all desirability to truth, every truth, even plain, harsh, ugly, repellent, unchristian, immoral truth. For such truths do exist. At every step, one has to wrestle for truth. One has had to surrender for it almost everything to which the heart, to which our love, our trust in life cling otherwise. That requires greatness of soul. The service of truth is the hardest service.
The way to knowledge for Nietzsche is not easy. It doesn't lead directly, but in a roundabout way, to diverse vantage points on different aspects of life. Scientific inquiry, historical investigation, psychological analysis, and many other forms of reflection give some insight. Each can help us interpret the others. All these perspectives play a part in Nietzsche's kind of thinking. The results may not measure up to the standards of some philosophers, but Nietzsche finds them important. He believes they deserve the name of knowledge and surpass anything that might otherwise be achieved. And for anyone like him, this is not its only reward.
And knowledge itself? Let it be something else for others. For me, it is a world of dangers and victories, in which heroic feelings too find places to dance and play. Life as a means to knowledge. With this principle in one's heart, one can live not only boldly, but even gaily, and laugh gaily too.